What is up, people? So today, I'll be doing a movie review on...
Let me ask you something. Do you think we're a good team?
Of course. I just wish I knew what we had to do to prove it to everyone else.
This is a make or break assignment. Fail and I will split you up. I want the fox and the rabbit.
We have to solve the case. It's not what we
Of course, with these movie reviews, I have to give a spoiler warning. So if for whatever reason you have not seen this film, then I would suggest clicking off since I will be mentioning spoilers when talking about my different points. Once again, this is a spoiler warning. And with that, let's move on. So as usual, I'll be getting into the breakdown, including initial thoughts. For the positives, it'll be recognizable duo, character development / new types, world expansion / theme connection, and villain surprise twists. And for the negatives, it'll be Judy / Nick's abilities, villain representation, personal scenario placement, and similar components / scenes. And then will be my ending thoughts. First things first will be my initial thoughts. When it came to seeing the fox and bunny duo back in the land of Zootopia, I was pretty positive in that this would be another enjoyable experience of solving a second major case of sorts, having that witty and playful dialogue, and being interested in the world expansion for more new territory and types of animals. However, here is the one question I wanted to ask. Would I say this was the most worthy sequel? In some ways, it can be decently justified, while other ways, not so much to the same degree. Not only that, I also had some confusing moments at times throughout that brought down the enjoyment factor, which was a bit of a shame. Generally, this movie had familiar aspects that were fun to watch with some forms of new components added alongside for further development, but other components didn't hit the mark fully and needed to have better implementations that could have brought their visual display to greater levels. I just didn't felt much difference per se with this film in its elements, at least to me. Starting in the positives being recognizable duo. From solving their first major case of figuring out the missing animal that has gone savage scheme, now it's up to them in finding out about the forgotten, buried, and secretive land that had an entire population of reptiles. And even with having them back now as cop duo buddies, their recognizable witty nature was still there between the two. Seeing Judy being more serious and focus-driven individual, and having Nick being more whimsical and nonchalant, in having those back and forth moments between them, no matter if the overall tone of a certain scenario is serious or casual. One of those moments can be seen during the therapy scene, where Judy explained more about their friendship without Nick having his input on it, while on the flip side, Nick not having any legitimate response and simply chuckled as his form of response. It's pretty telling that they haven't really changed all that much in that aspect, which is nice that they never lost the way they operate with each other as duos. Furthermore, especially in the ways of diving right into a whole series of action / undercover scenarios as well. Having both of them go undercover dressed up as a couple with their quote-unquote baby when investigating a cargo container site, getting into a high-speed car chase with a van trying to get away, risking their lives and losing their ability to breathe when entering inside a very elongated water tube when chasing Gary the snake, and officially succeeding their duty after having to fight off and take down Paubert that tried to kill them off with the poisoning shooting device. These two are always willing to be put in dangerous scenarios in order to get the major case figured out and finding the core issue that motivated it to begin with. Due to their clear abilities though, there were moments that just didn't make sense to me, but I'll get to that in the negatives later. And now I'll talk about character development / new types. When it comes to the amount of characters that were shown, I did appreciate in how some characters were either developed further with new aspects they display and having some decent new ones as well. In particular with the new characters, the ones I enjoyed the most were Pawbert and Nibbles. In the case of Pawbert, I did appreciate in how despite him being part of the evil and greedy Linkson family, he parted ways in rejecting their premise and wanting to try and help out Judy in putting a quote-unquote stop to their evil plannings and acting as a form of setup. With Nibbles, she is just an all-around playful and very energetic type, especially when it came down to her entire field of being a conspiracy theorist and seeing the whole screen layout when she was on her podcast talking about different conspiracies. So having her as a form of assistance when trying to solve a case about an entire secretive reptile population and land, it became funny when she got acquired by Judy and thinking whether or not she can be able to complete the job on her end in helping them out. With the remaining new ones, I would say they were fine at best and kind of only served as sort of decoys in keeping the plot moving as Judy and Nick get more answers towards the case. Now, when it comes to further developed characters, the ones that had more of this were Judy and Nick, and it definitely brought some new sense of fresh air with them both. I did like some of the moments where things got personal between the two, indicating more developing care and their value they have for each other. One example can be seen when they were climbing up the high cliff with Nick playing the recorded audio from Judy's carried recorder of her being a dumb bunny. Not only did she call him out on playing that audio in a mocking manner, but her mood changing entirely when it slipped off their hands and falling down to the bottom, breaking into pieces. And Judy just not wanting to do anything with him afterwards, indicating on how much of a prized possession this particular recorder was to her. Another example is when Judy got more pieces of evidence and Nick wanted to forget about the case after being caught by the police officers that were trying to find them, emphasizing how much this was not worth dying for in providing the truth for this case, showing a sense of worry towards Judy. A last example is during the moment where they both have a heart-to-heart scenario, giving out their different sets of insecurities and feelings about not just themselves, but also the way they act and speak to each other. I did enjoy in how they displayed their true characteristics due to having deep care for each other and never really expressing it before until now, and how this will expand both their caring growth even more towards them both. Just to add one more additional component in being the little flirting type teases of dialogue at times. It was definitely an aspect in making the audiences wonder if anything more serious would even happen between them. And if there is somehow like a third film coming for this, they will probably further it even more, but only time will tell. Next point will be world expansion / theme connection. This was quite an obvious component that only makes sense to do in furthering the bigger world of Zootopia into new land and what they have to offer. The one aspect I enjoyed was how they merged ties with this secretive reptile land alongside the type of theme they incorporated with it, being around the premise of greedy wealth and forms of corruption, especially with seeing how badly the Linksley family wants to endure this entire land for themselves. It's nice that they added not only a more intriguing and interesting theme in going along how the overall plot and story goes when trying to figure out the root of the problem from the perspectives of the two main protagonists, but it gives a bit more sense of depth when it comes to the villains as well. Generally, it's good that they just didn't offer a new area to discover, wander around the new anthropomorphic scenery and seeing how the environment works and its functionality, and afterwards just calling it a day and moving on. Again, they gave it more sense of depth. And lastly, for the positives will be villain surprise twists. There is no shadow of a doubt that the villains that are showcased in this film were done much better that I wish the first one could have matched in some way. It begins with the ground foundation in seeing the main leader being Milton, providing the orders and displaying out directly his main evil plan in gaining the reptile land just for the pure sake of bigger and greedier wealth. And everyone is on board with this major plan, except for one in being Pawbert, or at least we thought what his legitimate intentions were, as it played out with him trying to help out Judy and Gary and eventually finding the reptile territory, it all led to Pobert doing a complete 180 on her and Gary in letting his true colors show. And when thinking back on it, he really did play out the role of a secretive spy in a way, also known as a mole, going along a fake persona with his intentions in making it seem he was on the side of resistance and justice with Judy and Gary, acting as the odd one out and being under the nose of Judy and Gary the whole time he was with them, thus having his crazier side being revealed as well when trying to kill off Judy and Nick with the poisoning device. Generally, the setup and how things eventually built up from being more tamed to cranked up, they were done better and having more of an interesting depth with this theme choice. However, there was a definite missed opportunity in how it was represented, which I'll also get into later. Now onto the negatives, starting with Judy's/Nick's abilities. I can't lie, it was strange when it came to the doubtful and demeaning comments somehow still being displayed towards Nick and Judy in their abilities. Weirdly, when it came from the main police chief, Bago. I get that he provides a seriousness when it comes to the tough jobs of all the police officers for the department in their services of case solving, but I kind of expected him to at least have more faith towards the two, especially in how damning the piece of evidence that was provided to Bago being a literal snake scale skin. And yes, even though it's good to take into consideration that the actual time frame from the first film to the second one was around 1 week, I still found it a little strange that Chief Bago's sense of confidence or form of respect didn't change to some degree with Judy and Nick. Since thinking about it, he obviously accepted them being cop partners when Nick joined the police department. I don't remember if Bago was during the whole stage event from the ending of the first film, but he definitely had full acknowledgement and possibly even had some case reports from them during that week phase. I can't lie, seeing that towards the beginning was honestly a bit weird. Next will be villain representation. Now, while I did have my enjoyment factors with the villains, I think the representation elements could have been displayed better in emphasizing their motives. There was the initial foundation about their big plans, more towards the beginning as I mentioned, and having a flashback moment in how snakes were framed by Link Slave members in supposedly murdering their tortoise maid and taking the credit for Angie's the Snake invention with the city climate engineering system. However, I think there needed to be scenes that would emphasize the Link Slave's beginnings from the lens of their family members, not only with them, but as well with Gary's past relatives as well, in giving that mixture of perspectives between the two different species. In the case for the Lynxless, it could display more scenes in their kind of greedy and corruptive mentality when rising up to higher forms of power, being purely blindsided by money to extreme selfish levels. Some aspects could include their poor treatment against snakes as a whole, more of their manipulative and irresponsible tactics when changing part of an event in order to benefit them in some way, and even scenes actually showcasing how they may envisioned taking over the reptile land once acquired. Now with Gary's kind, it could display scenes that would be along the lines of how their kind and location became more essentially non-existent and their form of abilities in creating. Some aspects could include the kind of interactions they may have had with some of the Lynxling members through forms of rough disagreement and dialogue, seeing their capability of engineering going into detail about the importance of their climate system creation and how it can expand to other Zootopia territories, and even more scenes that can emphasize with animals talking about different rumors based on the snake reptiles in not seeing one for many years and whether anyone has seen sightings or purely faking them. These types of scenes for both Lynxley's and Gary's kind could have provided more interest with how the conflict component was represented. So next up will be personal scenario placement. I want to start off by saying the overall pacing of this film was fairly steady and fast in its mixture, going back and forth on higher forms of action scenes than other forms more tamed with bits of seriousness and sprinkling of comedic bits type scenes. The one issue I have was when it came to the moment between Judy and Nick opening up towards each other. After being put through multiple tense scenarios, it's when that moment occurs afterwards and didn't really hit properly for me. It's not the actual scene that's the issue, it's more of the form of placement. I wish there was better placement in leading to this more personalized moment between the two, alongside the other serious moments they had in terms of how they acted to each other. In changing the placement of these types of scenes, it would have been nice if it was brought to a bigger breaking point between Judy and Nick, causing more emotional feelings that felt more personal and displaying more on how much their friendship really means to each other as the film played on after the breaking point. When thinking back on the similar scenes from the first film, it felt it had more weight to it in how we saw their backstories when they were little and being dealt with cruel and disapproval moments, especially with Nick having reminding of his past and how badly it hurt him, and Judy having forms of empathy towards him. Coming back to the second film, I believe there needed to be better depiction on both their flaws and sense of care deep inside of them, just things along those lines. And lastly, I'll talk about similar components/scenes. This is where I've had moments that brought back certain reminding in how the film felt similar in a way to the first film. Some similarities I didn't have an issue with due to not really expecting such a massive change. Those would include the witty dialogue between Judy and Nick, them both being put in another sort of case to solve, and doing forms of exploring in trying to find clues and gather information. Other scenes, however, kind of wish they would have done something different and more significant. Two examples from my memory that fit were the beginning part of Bago having a form of doubt in the abilities of Judy and Nick, and towards the end of the twist villain using some sort of device in trying to kill off Judy. In the case of Bago's doubtful mindset, like I said in the first negative trait, just having more of a faithful sensation towards Judy and Nick. Now with the device the twist villain used, I think it would have been more intimidating if Pobert would have grabbed the snake in holding it tightly, letting out Gary's fangs while having Judy pinned down on the ground and putting the fangs closer to her. Point being, there were definite opportunities in at least trying to take a more different direction in how some elements and scenes were implemented that could have elevated them to better extents, and not necessarily feeling all that similar. And again, it is a bit of a shame. And with all that, we have reached the end. Even though I've had my fair share on liking some of the improvements and familiar enjoyable factors, I really didn't feel the most dramatic difference with the second film. Whether it is seeing the duo going on another big solving spree with a case, or displaying new forms of openness in trying to show their care for each other, I just wish they emphasized more certain detailing that could have brought this film to better forms of representation and having a better mixture alongside the already enjoyable and recognizable features across the characters, plot, all that kind of stuff. As for the rating of this film, I'll be giving Zootopia 2 a 7.5 out of 10, and I will see you guys in another video. Well, actually, I'm going to end this video a little bit different, and by different, I mean I'm just going to basically showcase a YouTube Shorts edit that I did that's based around Zootopia. The thing was that it's not up anymore, or has not been up for a while, due to not really understanding a certain policy with the song choice that I picked for it, in basically having a 1 minute limitation on the song and only being able to use it for 1 minute. And I really did not want this edit to go to waste. So let's bring down some black bars here, change the little bit of the coloring of this, and enjoy this little Zootopia edited sequence.
Probably best if you don't have a predator as a partner.
You think I might try to eat you?
No.
This is not your worst idea.
How? That was almost a compliment.
Your worst idea is what you did with your ears.
Oh.